In every major technology shift, there is a moment when the interface changes. And when the interface changes, the security model has to change as well. The internet changed how companies connect. The cloud changed where companies work. Mobile changed who has access. Identity changed where the perimeter lies. Today, generative AI is changing how employees interact with software. For the first time, people no longer operate software only through code, forms, menus, and workflows. They talk to it. They give it tasks. They give it context. They give it knowledge. And that is exactly how a new, critical moment emerges. Not at login, not at upload, not at network access, but in the sentence right before it goes to an AI model. That sentence is the new handover point between people, corporate knowledge, and AI. And that is exactly where enterprise AI needs a new layer of control. Let's look at how employees have operated software until now. They had to know which screen to open, which field to fill in, which sequence in the code is correct, or which workflow leads to the right result. Software was a system you had to learn and understand. Generative AI fundamentally changes that. Today, an employee simply writes, "Draft me a response. Summarize this document. Analyze these financials. Compare these options." Or turn this into a presentation. And the software takes care of the rest. That is a massive leap in productivity. But at the same time, it is also a breach in security. Because for AI to deliver good results, it needs context. And that context is often exactly what a company needs to protect. Let's take a simple example. Imagine an employee working on a new product concept for a customer. He has gathered a lot of internal knowledge as well as some customer data, feedback, technical specifications, pricing models, positioning, and maybe even the idea for the next generation of the product. He opens an AI tool and writes, "Structure this product idea into a convincing concept for management." Then he adds his notes. From his point of view, normal work. He gets faster, more innovative, more productive, and can structure his thoughts. But from the company's point of view, something else is happening. Proprietary IP, product knowledge, sensitive customer data, strategic assumptions, all of it is handed over to a model. Not as a file, not as a classic upload, but as natural language. And that is exactly what classic security systems were never built for. And when an employee writes a prompt, they are not just writing text. They include context, customer names or contract details, sensitive product ideas, prices, margins, internal assessments, strategic assumptions, or even technical know-how. Or in the worst case, even personal data or intellectual property. The prompt has long stopped being just a question. The prompt is a data channel. And this data channel looks harmless at first. It looks like language. It looks like work. But it can have the same effect as a data leak. Today, the prompt carries your company's knowledge, and with it, the risk. Because a company's most valuable information is often exactly the information that makes AI most useful. customer data, contract knowledge, product knowledge, financials, source code, roadmaps, strategies, internal decisions. And this is where we arrive at the central contradiction of enterprise AI. AI gets better the more context it receives. But companies must control which context is allowed to go where. What an employee writes into a prompt is no longer just input. It is a data transfer. Because the moment this information is transmitted to an AI system, it is no longer under your own control. Then everything depends on the provider's terms. Is the data stored? Is it used for training or model improvement? Or is it even processed further by subcontractors? The employee just wanted an answer. What he did not notice, he just handed out company knowledge. And not as an attachment, not as an export, not as a database dump, but as a prompt. And nobody stopped him because nobody was in control at this point. And not because security is missing, but because security sits in the wrong place. And from the employee's perspective, this is nothing special. He is just writing an email. He is just structuring a concept. He is just having a contract explained to him. He is summarizing a customer call. He is analyzing numbers. He is doing his job. He is productive. He saves time and he improves quality. So it looks like work. It is work, but with a new layer. And in most companies, that layer is still wide open. And that is what makes this problem so dangerous. Not because employees act maliciously, but because good, innovative work turns into a data risk. And now, it has happened. No external attack, no data exploit, no suspicious login, no compromised identity, but through a seemingly legitimate action of an employee using AI. And that is exactly why this moment remains invisible. That is the difference. The old security world looks for suspicious behavior and asks questions like, who is allowed to log in? Which device is allowed? Which file is being moved? Which traffic goes where? But with generative AI, the new questions have to be, what is in the prompt? What is the meaning of this request? What knowledge is being handed to a model right now? And should that even be allowed to happen?
I am Julian, co-founder of AIZ and the inventor of BRANE. Let me show you what is technically new about this moment. With classic software, control sits mostly around the application. Who is allowed to log in? Which application may be used? Which file may be moved? Which connection is allowed? With generative AI, that is no longer enough, because the security-relevant content is not created before usage. It is created during usage, in the prompt, in the specific task, in the context the employee gives the model. And exactly there, most companies have no real control point. The system may know who the user is. It may know which tool was opened, but it does not decide whether this specific information may be seen by this model. The question that really matters often goes unanswered. What is this employee giving the model right now? Is it general knowledge, or is it customer data, contract details, internal figures, product ideas, or proprietary IP? That is exactly where the risk emerges. Not when the tool is opened, but in the moment the prompt goes to the model. And between these 2 points, most companies are missing a technical decision layer. A layer that checks before the model. Is this model allowed to see this content? Does the content need to be protected? Does the request have to stay local? Or does it have to be blocked? That is the gap. AI access is not the real problem. Uncontrolled AI interaction is. Classic security solutions were built for structured data, for files, for network traffic, for known patterns, for signatures, for access rights. But employees do not communicate with AI in rules. They communicate in language, in intent, in context, in meaning. An employee does not write, "I am transferring intellectual property." He writes, "Turn this product idea into a convincing concept." He does not write, "Here are confidential financials." He writes, "Explain the variance between plan and actuals." He does not write, "I am sharing customer data." He writes, "Draft a response to this customer." The problem does not always lie in a single keyword. The problem lies in the meaning of the entire interaction. DLP detects patterns. IAM verifies identities. SSE and CASP control access. EDR detects compromised endpoints. But none of these layers were built to assess the semantic meaning of an AI interaction in real time, and to decide before transmission to the model what may happen. This is exactly where a new security category emerges.
Over the past years, we have worked with more than 200 companies on AI. From mid-sized businesses to large enterprises. With CEOs, with CIOs, with CISOs, with data protection officers, with department heads, and above all, with the employees who have long been using AI in their daily work. And almost everywhere, we see the same pattern. Companies have understood the potential. They know AI will massively change productivity. They know employees can write, analyze, research, code, and decide faster. But they also see the other side. Customer data going into AI models, contracts into AI models, financials into AI models, product knowledge into AI models, internal strategies, proprietary IP, regulatory responsibility. And this is not a theoretical risk. Harmonic Security found in an analysis of enterprise AI usage that almost 1 in 10 prompts can contain sensitive information. Do the math. If an employee writes just 20 prompts per working day, then at 8.5%, that is already 1.7 potentially sensitive prompts per employee per day. With 100 employees, that is 170 prompts a day. With 500, it is 850. With 1,000 employees, it is 1,700. And with 20 working days a month, at 1,000 employees, we are talking about 34,000 potentially sensitive AI interactions per month. So this is not a fringe problem. This is a new operational data channel. And exactly this creates a field of tension. The business units, the employees, they want speed, innovation. Each wants security and solutions. Security wants control, and legal wants provability. Everyone wants to use AI, but nobody wants to lose control over company knowledge. And that is why many companies today end up with one of two answers. Both are understandable, but neither solves the problem. Companies that recognize this tension react, as mentioned, in one of two ways. The first answer is prohibition. AI tools get locked down. Access gets blocked. Policies get tightened. And from the outside, that looks rigorous. But in practice, it does not solve the problem, because the need does not go away. If the official system offers no solution, employees find their own. Employees do not stop using AI. They use private accounts, private devices, unvetted tools, free applications, browser extensions, all outside the company's view. So the risk is not gone. It is just invisible. That is the result of shadow AI. The second answer is approval. Companies bet on productivity. They officially roll out cloud AI, Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, or any other AI platform. That makes usage visible. Employees get an AI tool and productivity rises. But the core problem is still not solved. Because now the content officially flows into external model environments, possibly onto external servers. Or it is even used to train future AI models. Every prompt can contain sensitive data. Every model can become a recipient. Nobody can cleanly trace what happened, which data was transferred, which model was even used, which request was anonymized or was not, which request should have stayed local, or which request should even have been blocked. Prohibition loses productivity and visibility, but uncontrolled approval loses data sovereignty and control. That is why the only right answer is a new layer. Do not block and do not blindly allow. Enable with control. Imagine an employee in product development. He is working on a new feature, not yet public, not yet patented, not yet on the market. He has an internal concept, technical details, customer feedback, differentiation from the competition, pricing models, launch arguments, and he wants to move faster. So he writes into an AI tool, improve this product concept and turn it into a management template. Then he pastes in the internal notes. From his perspective, that is efficient. From the company's perspective, highly critical. Because this is not about just any text. This is about proprietary IP, about product strategy, competitive advantage, about knowledge that may have been built up over years. And this is not a theoretical concern. At Samsung, it was publicly reported that employees entered sensitive information, including code, into ChatGPT. The consequence was a data leak, and Samsung restricting or even banning the internal use of generative AI models. So the decisive point is not that someone acted maliciously. The decisive point is sensitive information being entered into an external AI system. And once the data is truly out, an internal control problem becomes an external reputation, legal, and liability problem. You see the same with classic data breaches. At Europcar, an incident was reported in 2025 in which attackers allegedly compromised access to source code and customer data via AI platforms. Reports spoke of up to 200,000 affected customers and of data sets being published or threatened to be published. So the problem is not that employees use AI the wrong way. The problem is that AI works especially well when employees enter exactly the data that is most sensitive. Without a control layer, the company is left with a bad choice. Either block productivity or risk your own data. BRANE creates the third option, enable productivity and protect company knowledge. Many companies believe the problem is solved if the provider uses European servers, or if they promise not to use the data for training, or if they promise to provide a DPA agreement. All of that can be important. But can the provider truly guarantee it? And should this information even be allowed to leave the company in the first place? Besides, server location is not automatically data sovereignty. Under certain conditions, most providers are obligated to hand over information, even if the data is technically processed or stored in Europe. Just recently, in a hearing, the chief legal officer of Microsoft France had to admit that there is no guarantee that EU data is safe from being transferred to the US. That does not automatically mean it happens, but it does mean for sensitive corporate data, server location or an enterprise model alone is not enough. Because the decisive question is not, where is the server? The decisive question is this model allowed to see this content at all? And that decision must not happen after the transfer. It has to happen before the prompt leaves the company. Before an external model gets access to the sensitive data. Before normal AI usage turns into an uncontrolled data leak.
AI regulations reinforce exactly this point. Inside a company, AI is no longer just a tool you approve. AI becomes a system that has to be governed. Companies must be able to explain where is AI being used, who uses it, which data flows in, which models are used, and which risks arise, which rules apply, and how is usage monitored. Here is the key. These questions cannot be answered with a PDF alone. Not with a training session, not with a list of approved tools, and not with a generic AI policy. Because actual AI usage does not happen on paper. It happens in the prompt, in the specific interactions, in the moment an employee hands context, data, and a task to a model. If companies have no technical control there, they will later struggle to prove that their rules actually worked. That is why enterprise AI needs more than access. You need governance in usage, in front of the models, with clear rules, with technical enforcement, and with traceable decisions.
And that is exactly why it is not enough to simply approve AI, and it is not enough to ban AI either. Neither answers the most important question: what is a model allowed to see? Not in principle, not in theory, but in every single interaction. Is this content allowed out? Does it need to be protected? Does it have to stay local? Does it have to be blocked? That is the new control point between employee and model, between company knowledge and AI, between productivity and risk. And exactly there, generative AI needs a new security layer, a layer that does not just react once something has happened, but decides before anything happens. We call this category AI Interaction Firewall, a layer that does not just control whether an employee may use AI, but controls what the AI is allowed to see in that moment. A layer that inspects prompts before they reach the external model, that protects sensitive content, that routes requests according to your own company rules, and that can enforce local processing when content is critical, and that makes every relevant decision traceable. That is the difference. Do not ban AI. Do not blindly approve AI. Enable every interaction with control. That is the AI Interaction Firewall, the new control layer for enterprise AI.
And this is the product, BRANE AIF. A single platform for every AI interaction in your company. BRANE gives employees access to AI and gives companies control over what that AI is allowed to see. Not as yet another isolated AI experiment, but as a control layer across users, data, models, policies, and audit. One platform for secure, scalable, and traceable AI usage. Self-hosted, optionally air-gapped in your infrastructure, under your control. For companies that do not just want to use AI, but want to operate AI with sovereignty. You can hold it in your hands. You can mount it in your rack. You can run it where your most sensitive work happens. In your IT, in your network, by your rules, unbox it, power it on, connect it, define your policies. And individual AI tools become a controlled AI infrastructure. BRANE AIF is not just a device. It is the physical anchor of a new enterprise AI layer. Let me show you how BRANE works. An employee writes a prompt. BRANE receives it before it reaches an external model. Then Guardian takes over. Guardian is our control and routing engine. It analyzes the interaction in real time, detects sensitive content, checks the policy, and decides what may happen with this request. An uncritical request can go to an approved cloud model. A request with sensitive identifiers gets protected before an external model sees it. A request with especially critical context stays local, and a request that violates the rules gets blocked or safely rephrased. The employee still gets his answer, but the company controls which context reaches which model. That is the decisive difference. It is not the employee who has to decide what is safe. The company defines the rules. BRANE enforces them in every interaction. Here you see an employee in customer service. She receives a complaint. The text contains a customer name, a contract number, and specific details from the customer relationship. She asks the AI to draft a response. Without BRANE, this request would go straight to a model. With BRANE, something different happens. Guardian detects there is sensitive information in here. A name, a contract number, and customer-specific context. The policy says this request may go to a powerful cloud model, but only in protected form. So BRANE replaces the sensitive information. The model sees no real customer name, no real contract number, and no directly identifying customer data. It sees the professional context it needs to write a good answer. The answer comes back. BRANE restores the protected information locally. The employee sees the complete answer. The customer receives a professional message, and productivity is preserved. But the security outcome, that is a different one. The sensitive identifiers were never handed to the external model. A core mechanism behind this is called smart rehydration. If the policy allows a cloud model, BRANE removes sensitive identifiers before the request leaves the company. The model only sees the protected version. The mapping stays local. The answer comes back. BRANE reinserts the real values before the employee sees the response. To the employee, the result feels complete. For the company, control is preserved. And if the context is too sensitive, the policy allows no external model at all. Then the request stays local. This is not a rigid lock. This is context-sensitive governance. Depending on the user, the department, the data type, the model, and your specific company rules. Now, a second case. An employee is working on a new product concept. She wants to turn it into a management template. Her prompt contains internal details, feature ideas, technical assumptions, pricing model, customer feedback, and competitive differentiation. Unpublished product knowledge. For her, it is simply a productivity task. For the company, it is proprietary IP. Guardian detects. This prompt does not just contain generic phrasing. It contains confidential product knowledge. The policy says, no external model may see this context. BRANE routes this request locally. The employee still gets her support. She gets structure, better phrasing, a clear management template, but the product knowledge stays inside the company. That is exactly the point. Do not prevent AI. Enable AI where it can be used safely, and keep it local where company knowledge must not leave. BRANE runs on state-of-the-art AI infrastructure, as software, as an appliance, or as hybrid. For sensitive environments, BRANE can be operated self-hosted. For especially critical areas, optionally fully isolated, air-gapped, for scalable usage as a control layer across multiple models. One site can run its own appliance. Multiple sites can be connected through the secured corporate network. As the company grows, the architecture grows with it. Cloud deployed for speed, self-hosted for control, hybrid for the reality of modern enterprises. BRANE is not just an AI front end. BRANE is infrastructure, a governance layer between your organization and the AI world. BRANE does not tie itself to any single model. That is decisive because the AI market changes constantly. Models get better, they get replaced, restricted, deprecated. Models change their prices, their limits, or even their behavior. And sometimes the model a company built on yesterday is no longer available in the same form tomorrow. Just a few weeks ago, Anthropic locked down one of its models again. That is exactly why an enterprise AI strategy must never depend on a single model. Today, one team might use Claude, another GPT, another Gemini, Llama, maybe some local models. Tomorrow, the model landscape can shift again. With BRANE, companies can not only connect all leading models, they can let the AI decide which model is best for the task at hand, whether cloud, local, open source, specialized or future models. The policies remain, the audit trail remains, and the control layer remains. When the model changes, governance does not have to be reinvented. That is the point. Models are interchangeable, the control layer remains. For the employee, nothing changes. He writes his prompt. He gets his answer. He does not need to know which model is allowed. He does not have to decide himself which information is sensitive. He does not have to run a privacy check in his head for every task. BRANE decides in the background. When something was protected, the employee sees it. And when something is not allowed, BRANE should not just block, it still gives the employee a fitting answer through the local model. So he can keep using AI. Because modern AI security must not be a pure stopper. It has to guide, it has to explain, it has to make people productive. That is the difference between prohibition and governance. For the company, AI usage becomes visible. Which teams use AI, which models are being used, which data classes appear in prompts, and which requests were protected, were requests blocked, and where does risk emerge, where does productivity emerge, where does shadow AI emerge, and where are better policies needed, where is more training needed, and where can companies safely approve more. This is not just security. This is management capability, because what companies cannot see, they cannot govern, and what they cannot govern, they cannot scale. BRANE makes AI usage visible, governable, and scalable. And BRANE is not made of a single function. BRANE combines multiple protective capabilities in one platform. Detect which information is sensitive, understand the context it is used in, decide which policy applies, and protect. Before a model sees the data, route to the right model, and process locally when the context is critical. Return answers safely.
Today, we are talking about employees, about prompts, about natural language, about the moment a human hands company knowledge to a model. But enterprise AI does not stop there. The next wave is agents, autonomous AI systems that do not just answer, they act. They call APIs, they read documents, they write tickets, they create quotes, they analyze contracts, they start workflows, they work together with other agents, and with that, the risk shifts once again. Because today, the question is, what may a model see? Tomorrow, the question is, what may an agent do?
That is exactly why we are building BRANE, not just for chat. We are building BRANE as a control layer for AI interactions. Today, between human and model. In the future, also between agent, tool, data source, and company. Because when agents act autonomously, companies need clear rules. Which data may an agent read? Which actions may it perform? Which API may it call? Which decision requires approval? Which action must be blocked? Which action must be documented? BRANE thus becomes the foundation for safe agent usage in the enterprise. Not just safe prompts, safe AI actions.
This matters because companies will not just roll out chatbots. They will integrate AI into real business processes, into sales, service, legal, HR, finance, operations, or product development. And once AI intervenes in processes, protecting mere usage is no longer enough. Then you need extended control, not as a brake, but as the prerequisite for scaling agents. So BRANE protects interactions today and also prepares companies to safely operate agents tomorrow.
Others need a long integration project for enterprise AI, architecture workshops, security reviews, privacy assessments, tool selection, pilot phases, approvals. BRANE is designed to radically shorten that path. Just watch. Create an administrator, single sign-on, network configuration, select models, create departments, define the security profile. A summary, one click, done. A device becomes a governed local AI platform, not just access, control, not just usage, traceability, not just productivity, governance. The first step is simple, but the architecture is big enough for what comes next. More users, more models, more sites, more data sources, more workflows, and in the future, more agents. BRANE is not just a chat interface. BRANE is a working environment for AI in your company. That means you do not just define which models may be used. You also define what AI results should look like. Your logo, your language, your tone, your templates, compliance notes, corporate identity, and your standards. A company can define once. This is what a quote looks like. This is a management summary. This is a customer letter, an internal briefing, and this is our presentation structure. And BRANE applies these standards whenever content is created. Not every employee has to start from zero. Not everyone has to know which template is current. Not everyone has to enforce corporate identity manually. BRANE does not just make AI safer. BRANE also makes AI more consistent. A prompt does not just produce some random answer. It produces a result in the style, the structure, and by the rules of your company. That makes BRANE more than secure access to AI. BRANE becomes the platform where employees work in a controlled way, create content, and automatically stay within company standards. An AI environment that looks like your company and produces results that fit your company.
For the employee, BRANE means using AI without having to decide on every prompt what is safe, allowed, or critical, and without having to decide which AI model is the right one for the task at hand. For the business units, BRANE means AI does not get blocked. AI becomes usable in customer service, sales, marketing, HR, finance, or any other department.
And for IT, BRANE means one central control layer, SSO, roles, policies, models, deployment, APIs, instead of an uncontrolled tool landscape. For security, BRANE means every relevant interaction becomes auditable. Policies take effect before data leaves the company. Critical contexts stay local. Risks become visible. And AI becomes part of the security architecture.
For legal and compliance, BRANE means traceability, controllable data flows, documented decisions, auditable AI usage, and technical proof that governance does not just exist on paper. And for the CEO, BRANE means an AI strategy that scales without leading to further liability questions and risks.
For the future, BRANE means the same control logic that protects prompts today can secure agents and AI workflows tomorrow. One platform, one control point, one new category. This is BRANE.
And so, companies no longer have to choose between speed and security, between innovation and governance, between AI and control, between cloud and on-premises, because that was never the question. The right question is, how can employees use the best AI systems without the company losing control over its knowledge? Because that is exactly where the contradiction lies. Until now, companies had to either hold back that context or accept the risk. With BRANE, they no longer have to choose. Employees get access to the most powerful AI models, from ChatGPT to Claude to Gemini to Perplexity, and companies decide what these AI models are allowed to see. So BRANE inspects, BRANE protects, BRANE routes, BRANE processes locally when needed, and BRANE documents. That is governed freedom, not AI without rules, not rules without AI, but controlled freedom for enterprise AI. Every technological revolution has produced a new security layer. The internet brought the network firewall. The cloud brought cloud security. Identity brought zero trust. Generative AI brings the AI Interaction Firewall. Because the problem with AI is not just the model. The problem is the decision before it. What knowledge may this AI see? Which data may leave the company? Which information must stay protected? Which request must be anonymized? Which request must be processed locally? Which request must be blocked? Which decision must be traceable later? BRANE answers these questions in every interaction, in real time. For every employee, for every model, and in the future, for every agent. So that companies can use local models, use frontier models, use future AI agents without losing their most valuable asset, their knowledge. Because models will change, providers will change, regulation will change, technologies will change, but the need to protect sensitive knowledge inside companies will remain. That is why you need a layer that works independently of the model, semantically inspects every prompt, and decides how and where that prompt may be processed. So you can use all AI models while protecting your sensitive data. Exactly this layer is BRANE, the AI Interaction Firewall.